The last day of school is usually filled with joy. The idea of a long summer vacation, free from homework, tests and teachers, makes students excited. But for some, the last day of school holds dark secrets. What if, on the final day, something terrifying happened? Imagine being the last student in the school, or exploring areas that are usually off limits, only to find something you wish you hadn't. Here are 3 of the scariest last day of school horror stories that will send chills down your spine. 1. The haunted classroom. This story happened many years ago, in an old school that had a mysterious locked classroom. Everyone knew about this classroom, but no one dared to enter it. It had been locked up for years, and rumors spread that it was haunted. Students said that a teacher had once died there under strange circumstances. Some claimed they had heard strange noises from the room when walking by, but the truth was, no one knew what was inside. On the last day of school, a group of brave students decided to find out. They had heard the rumors, but they were sure that ghosts weren't real. They found a way to open the door, despite the fact it had been locked for as long as anyone could remember. When the door creaked open, a cold gust of air rushed out, as if the room hadn't been opened in decades. The students hesitated but stepped inside. Dust covered everything. Old wooden desks were scattered around, and there was a large faded blackboard at the front of the room. The air was thick, and the room smelled musty. It was clear that no one had entered this room in a long time. The students began to explore, laughing nervously and making jokes about the haunted room. But their laughter quickly stopped when they heard a soft tapping noise coming from the corner. They all turned at once, but there was nothing there. Trying to shake off their fear, they continued to look around. One of the students noticed that there was still writing on the blackboard. It was strange because no one had used this classroom in years. The message on the blackboard was faded but readable. "I'm still here." The student, trying to act tough, grabbed an old piece of chalk and started erasing the message. Suddenly, the chalk began to move on its own. The students watched in horror as new words appeared on the blackboard, slowly spelling out, "Leave now." Frozen in fear, none of them could move. The tapping noise grew louder, now sounding like footsteps approaching them from the back of the room. Finally, their instincts kicked in and they ran. They ran as fast as they could out of the room, slamming the door behind them. When they got to the safety of the hallway, their hearts were still racing. They never spoke about what happened again, but none of them ever tried to open that classroom door again. 2. The figure in the window. This story comes from a middle school where every year, on the last day of school, something eerie happens. It all began many years ago when a student mysteriously disappeared. The boy was last seen walking into the school after hours, but he never returned home. Despite a long search, he was never found. Some believed he had run away, while others whispered that something more sinister had happened. Over time, students began to report seeing strange things on the last day of school. The rumors were that the boy's spirit still wandered the school, trapped forever. But it wasn't until one group of friends saw it for themselves that the story took on a life of its own. One year, as a group of students were leaving the building after their final class, one of them happened to glance up at a second-story window. What they saw made them stop in their tracks. Standing there, looking out of the window, was a shadowy figure. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, staring down at them. The friends stared back, trying to figure out if it was just a trick of the light, but it wasn't. The figure was tall and thin, and though its face was hard to see, its outline was clear. One of the students waved, thinking maybe it was another kid who had stayed behind. But the figure didn't respond. It just continued to stand there, watching them. Feeling uneasy, the students quickly left the school. The next day, when they came back to pick up their report cards, they told one of the teachers what they had seen. The teacher, curious, went to the second-story room to check it out. When the teacher returned, their face was pale. They told the students that the room was empty. No one had been in that room for years. What made it even stranger was that the door to the room had been locked the entire time. The students were spooked, but things got even scarier the next year. Another group of students, on the same last day of school, saw the same shadowy figure in the same window. This time the figure was closer to the window, and one of the students swore they saw the figure wave at them before disappearing. Every year after that, students reported seeing the figure on the last day of school. Some say it's the missing student, forever stuck in the school, watching over the building. Others say it's something much darker. Whatever the truth is, the figure continues to appear, and no one dares to look too closely at that second-story window. 3. The lockdown experience. This happened 13 years ago when I was 16 years old. I was in grade 10, and it was my last year of high school. I had two good friends who made things better. We had been friends since grade 7, and we always stuck together. It was a normal day for all of us. Suddenly, the principal's voice came over the PA system. He calmly said, "Code Black." At first, we didn't know what that meant, but we quickly realized it was a lockdown. The strange thing was how cool and relaxed the principal sounded, like he was just making his usual morning announcements. When I heard it was a lockdown, I thought to myself, this might be fun. Grade 10 had been pretty boring so far, but I figured this would be something different. Our teacher quickly locked the door, closed the curtains, and covered the small window on the door with a big piece of paper. I could hear other teachers out in the hallway, locking the doors to the school's foyer. Our grade block had 5 classrooms, and outside the classrooms was a big open area, almost like a lounge room. It had couches where people could relax during recess and lunch. There were doors at each end of the foyer that led straight outside, and I could hear those being locked too. Most of the students stayed at their desks, but I sat on a bench by myself. I was used to sitting alone, in grades 9 and 10. I kept to myself a lot, mostly because of personal reasons why I didn't like the school. The room went completely silent, and soon it felt like the entire school was as quiet as a graveyard. The air was so thick with tension that you could almost feel it. At first, I thought the lockdown was a good thing because it got us out of doing any schoolwork. But as time went by, I knew I needed to be smart and listen to the teacher in case anything bad happened. There weren't any signs of danger yet, but the longer we waited, the spookier it got. I wasn't scared. I'm not afraid of anything. But the situation was so strange, and even though nothing had happened yet, I started to believe that maybe we were in danger. Maybe something bad was going to happen. Even though I'm a tough guy and not scared of much, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. I was ready to fight or run if I had to. After what felt like forever, I started to get annoyed. I was frustrated that we were still stuck in lockdown, even though nothing seemed to be happening. I kept sighing quietly to myself, trying not to show how irritated I was. Finally, after what seemed like hours, we got the all clear. The principal's voice came back on the PA, telling us that it was safe and we could go about our day as usual. I was relieved, and I'm sure everyone else was too. At lunchtime, I met up with my 2 friends, and one of them told me about a rumor that had been going around the school. People were saying that someone had held the assistant principal at knife point. The person who did it got expelled, but no one knew the full story. The last day of school was supposed to be a fun and exciting time, but for some students, it became a day filled with terror. These stories remind us that even in familiar places like schools, There can be dark secrets waiting to be uncovered. So next time you're walking down those empty school halls, be careful. You never know what might be watching you.